The hip-hop writer is a creator, composing understanding words of cultured brilliance, powering a rebalance of the elements equally. Pages of rejuvenated reaffirmation, simply the almighty leadership of insightful craft work that stands to build through any confrontation born to be. Yet his duty daily is as a journalist that questions properly and uses his ears to filter the real. And as the art decays by dilution, he concentrates the best again and again, exposing it in the print. Today's journalist and tomorrow's historian, he listens to share. Here is that necessary attempt executed again and again and again. This is the Power Right Show at S.STREET Media. This is your brother, the lone low life with the home-sewn garment, the Boricua with the build, the true and living God, stepping in score. Sunya is Allah, a.k.a. Skilla Straight Alone. We're on S.STREET Media, the evolution of media, where every intrigue will have its own show. Every incredible thought will have its own episode, and every timeless insight will be archived. And as I always say, this show is on my element of hip-hop, what I like to call the writer of art on art and science on music. The only show in history on this hip-hop writer element that I, a veteran of over 25 years now, have helped pioneer. All right, as we all know, though, I got stuff out. I got my book out, The Filtered Real Essays from the Invisible Renaissance. That's still out there, so contact me. Go on Amazon, or if you want a signed copy, you can contact me at Sunya's on the IG, Sunya7. And that book is just a primer for all the stuff that's going to come this year that we have published coming. You know, I just want to keep it simple. There are a lot of things that we're doing, though. Here at S.STREET Media, we're also publishing a new magazine, a very small but concentrated and incredible magazine coming out that I am honored to be the editor-in-chief of, the Cast Faction. It'll be basically your outlet to talk about the podcast that you follow, to talk about the issues in the podcast you follow, and really also learn about podcasting if you're interested in doing that. And just learn the ins and outs of it. So commenting on all the issues, commenting on all the commentators in the podcast, and our own critiques of the podcast, and you know, and just everything podcast related, which means every subject in the universe, but from this realm of new media, the new world that is the podcast, you know, and all of its associated variations of media. You know what I mean? And so if you're interested in that, email us here at skullstreetmedia@gmail.com. Sunez97, SUNEZ97 in our links here below, we'll have all the emails for you to contact us. And we're gonna get out our first issue in March. And it's gonna be amazing though. So get in where you fit in though. You know what I mean? And then make it work. Make it work. You know what I mean? Because this is new. And if you work with me and you work with us at S.STREET Media, you're gonna really learn how to do stuff in this business. You know, you're really gonna learn how to be a master. And that doesn't mean working for some other person, but also working with people that really know what they're doing, and then also being your own entity, if that so bees it. You know, the destinies that you decide, you know, with all Tupac emphasis on that. But there's a lot of commentaries we could go into. And I'm going to save these commentaries for other shows and stuff. Or if I really speed through 300, what was it, 300? No, yeah, let's keep it real. 400 records that I thought were worthy of keeping in my collection. That's 400 worthy. So let's assume that there's probably about 100 that I just ditched and didn't even take them, heard them, decided not to. And this episode is the reel of 2020, right? One of the most unique years. I'm not going to say the worst, though. You know what I mean? Because what you think of, you manifest, though. Start saying that was the worst year, though. Trust me, you'll draw up a better contender this year. But definitely one of the most unique years that we all will have lived. And I have a lot of commentaries about other things, you know, a lot of commentaries about MF Doom. If you go back to the latest Classic Storm Radio podcast with DJ Toshi, I believe it's episode 286, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. So I'm going to put you on DJ Toshi, ClassicStorm.podomatic.com. The last episode, 286. Got the bill with the great brothers with one of the best albums out this early year. Kev Brown and Jay Cyanide's new album. What's that called? Yeah, Stray Away from the Pack. And damn, they strayed away from the pack. Great album, great build with them. But they also threw in there an MF Doom tribute. And I have a lot more to say about MF Doom, but I'm going to save it for other shows. Save it for other things. And not for now. Right now we're doing this reel of 2020, and I know that when I start talking about all these records, it's going to go on forever and ever. Or I could keep it going on forever and ever because there's such great work here. And I'm sure that whatever I didn't like or disappointed with, though, I could go on forever and ever too. So it really could be something. But if you want to see my immediate thoughts about MF Doom, check out that latest episode 286 of DJ Toshi's Classic Storm Radio. More to come. I also have some commentaries on the Rap Grammys, though. You know what I mean? You look at these Rap Grammys and you see the songs are all total trash, and then you see the albums are magnificent, have a lot of magnificent quality on them, though. I find that very jarring, very intriguing. So that's another commentary I'll be getting into and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But also another deeper commentary that's to come in the weeks when I have time, when I don't have great guests. This idea that's pushed through a lot of our own people, black Americans, what they're calling themselves foundational black Americans, though. It's just, new tags, new gangs, you know what I mean? And not only trying to take away the Puerto Rican contributions to the creations of hip-hop, but even the Jamaican innovations and outright creators, such as diminishing Kool Herc or anything like that. And when you live through things, you can always find people that will diminish it, will not agree with it completely, people that saw things earlier. In almost all movements of culture, there's people that did things first that didn't actually complete the task. There are people that, more often than not, there are people that inspire that actually aren't named. And for a culture like hip hop, a hybrid culture, it is not made like a song is made, where you make it and it is known who makes it and it is made or even made at one time. Certainly not at one time. Hip hop is a process, a synergistic process of all these cultural expressions coming together, though. So it opens its door for a lot of ignorance, though, and the that I hear on the internet, though. You know what I mean? And colorism to take root, though. It seems that as we go along, though, a lot of the ignorance, though, that a lot of our greatest artists and a lot of our greatest musicians, and especially in hip-hop, spoke about to get us out of, it seems like this new generation is in them again. And, for a lot of that, though, and this is a commentary that will extend and kind of goes into the reel of 2020, it extends to the way hip-hop is made now. You know what I mean? There's an obsession, there's no way around it. There's an obsession with crime. There's an obsession with the qualitative validation of those who have done crime. There's an obsession with the legitimacy of hard times living and pure survival and success if it is done through crime. And by association, then the hip-hop music is a crime. And see, it's an attachment of two different types of crimes, though. Because most of the crime that is criminal in the street is negative crime. It might have to be done in many of the instances, but it's not something that would normally be done, right? If one was thinking of a righteous way, if one was thinking of the honorable thing to do, and for many of the more honest-minded, would be a choice that they wouldn't make. However, when you look at the rebellious roots of hip hop, particularly the music, the lyricism, it ends up being attached to the criminality, because at its best, hip hop is a crime against the status quo, you know? That's the best type of hip hop. The crime against the status quo, the Public Enemies, the peaks of Wu-Tang Clan, you know what I mean? KRS-One's, legacy, especially that legacy of the 80s into the 90s, where KRS-One was just like, one of the greatest MCs of all time. The early works of Ice Cube, you know what I mean? We could go on and on, you know what I mean? Public Enemy, of course, I said that, and Dead Prez, and it continues on and so on. But I think it extends greatly when we start talking about things like that. But before we get into the reel of 2020 and I get into this detail, one last thing I always like to addendum my last episode. I ended 2020 with the great Willie Ways. He's going to be spoken of in this, though, because I think he has what I call one of the lone treasures, one of the few albums that you ought to go out and listen to, and I think personally own. Because now that 2020 is done, we can start to begin to get a context of what are the albums that spoke about that year the best. There are albums we could say are better that did not really speak to the time period of 2020. You know what I mean? Like, for example, if you look at some of the albums that are on the Rap Grammys, Alfredo is not an album that you're going to go back and say, that really defined 2020, In fact, mostly everything that Freddie Gibbs says, though, is pretty not linked in a specific time. It's more for an era, right? And things like that. Whereas what Willie Ways gave us certainly is something that is timeless to me, but also speaks to that era, to the time of specifically 2020. So let's get into it, though. All right, let me tell you what I hate. It is not a song. It is not people's music. It is not any of these pop artists. It is, right now, we're tackling the idea of, making a best of and listing things. I hate listing. If you all have checked out any of my works, the Filtered Real book, the PremierHipHop.com, you notice I never put grades on anything. Grades were a big war. I'm a little bitter because every single review I ever did for a magazine, I never got input. I never got real definitive input about what grade I think it should get. You know what I mean? I think probably the most glaring, though, is that I thought that Big Pun should have got the XXL and double XL, and he only got the XL, But as the writer who wrote the review for Capital Punishment, I only had I had a say in that grade. Like if it was hey, what do you think it should get? Like if I didn't even write it, though. Like it was just, hey, you want to check out what this sounds like? What do you think? What would you give it anyway? And I'm like, yeah, I just wrote down what you think I ought to give it. You know what I mean? If you read that review. So I never like reviews because it also reduces the qualitative uniqueness of every great record. So let's not talk about records that would go let's say you have it in your head, the mics, the source mics. You might have it in your head that there's a glaring difference that deserves to be given for a 2 mic versus a 4 mic, right? But when we're talking about records that let's say like this year, so many records are high quality that how many 4 mics or how many 4.5 mics are you going to get without needing some kind of perspective? So let's say out of these 400 records, I could say that I would like to think that I wouldn't be collecting, and I would say this. I think that at least maybe about 200 of those records are of a 4 level quality at least. 4 and above. This shows you how much quality there is out there. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't like grades, though. People look at grades, and then they just want to see if your review matches the grade and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And then sometimes you could get lost because you could pick a 4 out of 5 mics. We're using mics, though, as the standard here, right? And then now you're writing your review to fit that grade. if you know about writing about this stuff, then you know what I mean, though. You know, when you write a review about a record, though, you should be gliding along into your insights about the record. And even yourself, as you're listening again and again and writing this piece, by the end of it, you should have insights about it that you want to share with the people so they could see aspects of it that you thought were worthwhile of rewind, thought worthwhile of repair, and thought worthwhile of criticism. And it's only then that the grade would be made. But most people, you know, let me tell you something. You're not really making the grade when it's done. And in magazines, the editors aren't reading your review and making the grade after they read your review. They're asking you to do the review for the grade that they already have in their head as they heard it. You see? So it's their grading system. It's not yours, the writer. So it's always something I find very negative. You know what I mean? Very negative. You know, the person that wrote reviews for most of these albums that you love in the 90s, they really weren't the ones that were giving the grade. But they were the ones that were harassed. They're like, yo, you only gave Cuban Links 4.5. You know, you only gave Infamous 4.5. You know, and it usually was not them, unless they were one of the editors that decided to write that. And that didn't always happen, by the way. It didn't always happen. And as these magazines got more popular, pop, and more driven in the mainstream, they would stop even doing an editor consensus, meaning a consensus with the people that know the music the best in your magazine. They would include marketers, advertisers, marketing departments, you know what I mean? And then by the 2000s, I'm arguing records with people in marketing, people in sales, people in advertising, you know what I mean? People in the fashion department for the magazine, you know what I mean? What if I could crack a shit? But so in this reel, I think that because of the great quality, and I think because of the massive amount of records that are coming out that are of a good quality, you know, because when you're a hip hop listener, I want to write this for you, the hip hop listener. If you're just an avid listener, hell, go to the Grammys and get those records, because, you know, except for one of them, I like all of them. There's only one record I'd say was trash that got nominated for a Grammy. You know what I mean? They had to throw one trapper in there. You know? But all those records will give you a good start. And 4 records, right? You're a loose rap fan. 4 albums is good enough. You repeat that, you keep it moving, and, you know, you enjoy your day. But if you're a collector and you're interested in who's coming out and you want to get a perspective of what this whole field looks like, what happens is with making a 50 list record, best albums, or making a 400 like my man Max Lowe, is that people don't really know what you mean between number 200 and number 100. You know what I mean? I'm going to go check out his what he ranked 150 over 200. I mean, that doesn't really happen like that, even for a good collector. You know what I mean? And so we're just looking at the records we know and seeing where you put it, and then just criticizing your list as opposed to getting into what are the criticisms of these records. So that's a problem too. So I didn't want to do that. You're not going to get a top 10 from me this year. I'm not going to do it. By the amount of words that I give artists, the amount of time I spend talking about artists, you'll know who I think are the best of the best. You know what I mean? But all these lists are trash. And a lot of these underground blogs, they're almost, you could see them on the sellout grid. All of a sudden, though, they're doing the 50 best albums, right? Check this out. Let me just pull up a record here. They're doing the 50 best albums, though, and I'm just throwing it out there. They'll have the Booze Brothers, right? The hardest shit, the Booze Brothers. And then they'll have maybe, you know, maybe John Jiggs or something. And they'll have somebody a little bit more popular, Rock Marciano. And then they'll put Little Baby in the mix, though. You know what I mean? How the hell does this rank? You know what I mean? This is like making a list of vegetables, though, and you put Pop-Tarts in the damn list. You know what I mean? Pop-Tarts is an incredible vegetable. It's between broccoli and carrots, though. I really enjoy it. You know what I mean? This stuff doesn't go. Now, what we're getting, though, is that we continue to get the collective, the mass media, the big media of rap music, and then we get the hopefuls that are writing these blogs and blow up a little bit, do some interviews with the real niggas from Ka and others, and early interviews with greats. And then all of a sudden, though, now it's their turn to try to tell you how the pop records fit in seamlessly with the hardcore records, though. Because I want to listen to hip hop. If I listen to hip hop and I listen to my brothers Rim and Eddie Kane, right, as BK Caminantes, and I switch over to some pop stuff, that shouldn't have an equivalent of the genre. Like, I'm in hip hop's world. You're in hip hop's variant. Right? You're in an altered genre, right? You're listening to Cyrus Malachi and then you switch over to Bad Bunny. You switch genres, though. Okay? You switched genres. You didn't go, you didn't go from hip-hop to hip-hop. So we're not going to do that shit either. But I want to give you a sense of the field. And so in this reel of 2020 that I'm writing right now, right? It's at a paltry 9,000 words. Paltry 9,000 words, because I was trying to do this and have this piece published before I did this show, but it was just too much. I couldn't do it. And one of the things I found was that I could take you through this list and the concepts of it, so you'd be ready to read it when I publish it, and name some of these guys that are really great that I've already spoken about and mentioned, so you could see how this works. But the point of this reel of 2020 is so that, like my book, The Filtered Reel, you get an idea of the vast empire, the vast universe of this what people are calling the underground hip hop, what I just call hip hop, the best hip hop, and this era that I call the invisible renaissance that is leading into something new. I think I know what I will name it. I have it named, but it's still certainly of the invisible renaissance. It's all out there for us, excelling, but it's invisible to everyone. So, what did I do? How did I do this? Did I make a list, though? They're lists, but without order. And they're also overlapping lists. So think of a circle with all of these sections here, where you could say, okay, it doesn't, he's not just in that category. But I didn't leave him in only that category. I put this artist here and there. And then you'll find the place where to read about them. You know what I mean? Where I just felt like I wanted you to remember what category they had great dominance in, or I felt like they could be remembered there. You know what I mean? Just for this particular moment that I wrote this piece. Right? So let me read off these categories. They're in ciphers. I call the categories the ciphers, right? And as of now, there's quite a few. I didn't even count them. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 categories, right? And here's how the categories go. And none of these categories are the top. None of these categories are the bottom. You'll see that some of these categories have more significance. The first category, though, is what I think, and I put it at the top only because I want people to know them first. And I put them as the burgeoning stars, the stars that are coming out, the ones that we should really be studying, the ones that are on that verge or entering their prime. Guys like Eddie Kane, you know what I mean, who I wrote about, who I had on this show when last year he had Aruku out, his debut album. And then this year he had 3 albums. Nezzy Star, right? An EP. He had the 1224, which is great. And he had my favorite that he did, this duo LP with Rim called BK Caminantes, the Walkers, right? In Spanish for the Walkers. You know what I mean? Although I think, I gotta, let me do the knowledge here. I'm pretty sure that they spelled the Caminantes wrong on the cover. Let me see if they did that. just so I could bother them. Did they? No, they spelled it right though. But some of the song titles came out wrong when I had to fix them. But just simply the Walkers, because the Walkers is the clique of producers and that cipher that's making these tracks that are really great and part of the burgeoning underground movement of all these great songs. But the thing, so we have artists like Eddie Kane, though, who's really finding his, I said here, let me just read a little bit. Gifted with intangibles that express natural grit, sharp clarity, and a seemingly permanent in-groove cadence, Kane conveys a needed street aura so many seek to find Legan, but niggas be awful. You know what I mean? And if you're reading that, though, you catch that. You know what I mean? I said, they seek to find Legan, but niggas be awful. NBA, right? But then you have my brother Allah Preem out in Rochester. He's traveled a little bit. He's somewhere else now, but always representing Rochester. Though he flooded with a lot of EPs that I think deserve a listen to, and I think that if you listen to them, I think that at least one or two of them you'd have to put in your collection. I'd start with the bootleg EP, the Dark Arts EP. You know what I mean? Just a great tone, perfect voice for MCing, real clarity on the mic, real grit. A lot of great stuff. Then, one of those guys that's a real superstar. If we would take superstars, you know what I mean? If the radio would actually play people like that, dynamic personas that have a lot of, presence on the mic. It'd definitely be Bub Rock, and Bub Rock hit us with 2 albums, though. The Rock Period and Peace of Mind that they continue to become more and more not only introspective without losing the grit, but also intimate. Then I had my man Dat Boy Vic, who's very opinionated, very insightful on the always has challenging thoughts on the Twitter, but even more challenging thoughts on his record album that he released this year. Dat Boy Vic, DATBOI VIC. Another great album. You know what I mean? I wasn't expecting it. It's certainly one to get, The Almighty Pen. That's the name of the album, though. Definitely a rising star that you should hear. Then you see people that they only have a small amount of work, but if you listen closely, they have all the tools. I'm thinking of Plex Diamonds, the BKMC. 2 very short EPs, They, in today's time, you could go on Bandcamp, you listen to them, and you forget about them the next day. When I go back to it and I start listening, I hear all types of techniques, all types of mastery. So there's a lot going on there. These are the type of burgeoning stars I'm talking about. Spoda, who we had on the show before, right? Intensity, energy. You know what I mean? Presence, that hype shit. You know what I mean? I'm so anti-2000s and the dark ages. But if you were to pick like a hype MC that would really survive in that time with like overly trebled beats but still get everybody hype, I definitely would put Spoda back there. You know what I mean? And I think the State of Emergency album he came out with is that's bench press material, man. Is definitely stuff to get you amped up. K Burns, one of the smoothest voices out there. You know what I mean? Loved his work. He's a soul singer on the mic. He's a soul singer on the mic, though. You know what I mean? That's all you need to know. I'll say for now. UFO Fev. Very dope Boricua MC. Came out with 3 albums, though. A lot of heralded production, though. One album by Static Selector. I'm forgetting who did the production on the other ones, but they were no less Big Ghost. That's right, Big Ghost did the Albizu one named after Pedro Albizu Campos, the great Puerto Rican revolutionary leader, right, for our independence. And then I finished this list with the Mussolini. Now the thing is that some of these MCs, they can actually you'll see as we go along now into the next one, I put the God MCs. When I teach my class, the Peace Course, when I do it in classroom or online, and I do it online, people always asking me like, yo, who's the God? Like, who's the God that's really rhyming? Who's got the knowledge? And that's always very subjective, because people, what we teach is knowledge itself. So people might have some of it and they might be really inspired by some of it. They might live some of it, but they might not be dealing with it like that. So I wanted to give you a list where I could say I am near 100% correct that these are the gods. You know what I mean? Watch I write the list though, and one of them, they'll be all right. They'll be all right. You know what I mean? But the knowledge of self has to be highlighted because it's a foundation. You know, Ras Fresco has a skit. I forgot the brother that did the skit, but he said something that I've been saying to people all the time. I've said it in lectures. I've said it in writings I've written over the years, that if you want to understand the 5% to hip hop, it's very much, you would to get a context, you might want to compare it to Rasta and Roots Reggae. It is that important though. So, and that's why there's confusion, because a lot of people in Roots Reggae aren't really Rasta like that, but the language, the ethos, the nature and the charisma of performance is exuded in that nature. So we end up being part of how you do this, how you rhyme. A lot of people aren't 5% and say that they have no connection to it, but their cadence, their nature of teaching, their nature of speaking on the mic, that's all from the gods. It's all, it's all from us. I guess if you had to start that list, and I'll just go through this list quickly, there is so much stuff here. You know what I mean? You got Darkim, BLR. I had to put him first. I interviewed him recently for DJ Toshi's Classic Storm Radio. Probably have him on the show, get him on the show. We could talk even longer about all types of things. Along with me, Darkim, we're pretty much the teachers that you would find if you go to a law school in Mecca to get this knowledge yourself nowadays. You know what I mean? And certainly the ones that you would get it if you wanted to get it from the root and be online and YouTube. Along with all the other great gods like Saladin and others that build regularly, online. But Darkim's album, produced by Antediluvian King, produced by Endemic, was a great record. I have a whole podcast talking about it with him. My brother Infinite Mind, we had him on a show, one of our early shows with Infinite Mind. He's in the middle of releasing albums that compile all of his work through the years. He just released Volume 2. Last year he did Volume 1. 2020 was Volume 1. So he's an MC to look out for. One of the best I've ever heard. Again, a La Prime. I mentioned him in Burgeoning Stars, right? But he also gets on this list because he's the God. Then we have Ras Fresco, who I mentioned, but I built on him, for example, in a different category for a certain reason, and you'll see. A-Prime, we had A-Prime on the show last year as well. His album War God is one of the most toughest records you'll ever hear, and all of his music is tough. So anything associated with him is going to be the tough stuff. Nothing soft, rugged, intense, lyrically violent, but also a lot of insights. And then the God Ralphie Reese. A lot of people, I feel a lot of people slept on Ralphie Reese because the God out in Philly didn't. It seemed like he was part of the ciphers that everybody. And, he's got some social media presence. So, we're like, oh, okay. I think people expected him to flood with a lot of albums. And instead, he only released one. I think it was the Shine Mosley 3 album. But the quality is stellar. His beat making, one of the best at making a dusty track. You know what I mean? Along with A-Prime, actually, with War God. They don't make stuff that sounds like there's any new technology being used at all, though. You know what I mean? Like, they sound like the best thing that they have is floppy disk. You know what I mean? It's extremely dusty. You know what I mean? What they're doing. And Ralphie Reese, though, even when you see he was written about in Bandcamp and stuff, I've always hated using his Wu influence as a way of defining him, because he really doesn't rap that way. There's much more to his rhyme style. There's a lot of Philly in it. Just one of the dopest. A Lost record. King Arthur. You know what I mean? His Insurgent Theory album. I loved it. If you want to see an MC's MC, a guy that you just turn on, you just press play, turn it on, and you're going to see bar after bar after bar, and a lot of stuff said. It's not just going to be battle raps. It's going to go into ideas. It's going to go back into battle bars, go back into new concepts, commentaries, and just keep spitting and spitting. King Arthur is definitely one of those, definitely the guy. You know what I mean? Then you got Noah the Flood. The God, I like to say he's a MC, a real varied MC. Mic controller and a musical composer. Makes a lot of great beats though. Really good music. Great sampler. And he's got a great voice for MCing though. But this 2020 was very unique for him because it wasn't just his work he was rhyming on. He actually did great work on other people's beats. In this case, he did his album with Evildoer, the Noah and the Doer. I really like that. I was spoiled by that record because it came with the instrumentals, and it's the instrumentals that got me hooked into the album. And then of course I went back to Noah, and then I started to get obsessed with Noah because Noah had a great album with Stu Bangers. Respectfully, that's the name of the album. And then he had a great album with called The Piece with the Magnetic, where he had diverse choices of beat makers. So quietly, as a lot of these guys, you could say quietly and stuff like that, but I don't know what that means. You know, there's so many MCs. You kind of, it's not quiet. It's just that everything gets flooded and you don't know what's what. But Noah the Flood, if you want that gritty, hard body, 5%er, tinge militancy, with some really good samples. He knows how to make great sampled music, and he knows how to pick great sampled music. You know what I mean? Definitely. And then you have, and I'm just going to go off this list of the gods, though, but I'm going to talk about them later. Sauce Heist, Ty the Dale, Heist Life, Be the Nice Life, you know what I mean? Planet Asia, of course, had great work, though. And didn't really attack with a lot of albums like he said he could, or the ones that he's really been talking about, but the ones he came out with. But these in another category because there's something specific that he needs to be highlighted in that category. And then you got Supreme Cerebral, who I spoke of in another category. Or did I? No, I spoke about him here. But I included him in other categories. You'll see I mention him. But Supreme Cerebral, short but sweet, easily one of the absolute MC of the Year candidates. He rhymes with a fury. Like it's every rhyme has to be the greatest rhyme he's ever written, has to be the most intense rhyme he's ever performed, and he continues to succeed in that intensity. It's just a beautiful thing to listen to. You know what I mean? Let me see. Rounding off these God MCs, Ill Conscious though, who had I have a great interview with Supreme Cerebral, the DJ Toshi podcast. Ill Conscious, I have a great interview with him in the DJ Toshi podcast. Look for those. Just scroll down DJ Toshi Classic Storm Podomatic.com. And Ill Conscious had a very progressive EP this year. So it's something to look into and really see the new techniques he threw out there. And then, of course, I'm rounding it out here. STNAC, Don Pacino, Kill Army. They always have the militant works. And I'll use that to segue to the next cipher, hardcore militant hip hop. I wanted to highlight the hardcore militant hip hop because a lot of people are always looking for the most grandiose lyrics, or it has to have the most poppiest stuff. What is the best record? Some people are just giving you that work. Sometimes when we listen to hip hop, we just want to hear that work. We just want to hear that tough stuff. And we do want to hear stuff that's militant. And I try to combine both of these categories because they do merge. And I'd say at the top of the list is always, one of the pioneers of militant hip hop, Don Pacino. Had about 3 albums this year. I think, if I remember correctly, I didn't list it here. He's one of the people I didn't get to write about yet in this piece yet. He's one of the people that I think his last album that he released on Christmas Day was my favorite one. That's also a problem with making the list too early. You know what I mean? You know, the Grammys, they end at the end of August. Though. So people getting mad though, but the Grammys they end in August. They go from September, I think, to 2019 into August 2020. I don't. I do all of 2020 from January to December. And I just want to give you the name of that Don Pacino album. That way, if you want to collect immediately or check out something immediately, T4 at your front door. Clearly the best album he released last year. But if you want that hardcore, all of them are worthwhile. They're always worthwhile. I had Ness in here, but I talked about him in another category. Ness of A-Alikes. The Booze Brothers. They had a bevy of albums, though. It's just that they're doing albums separately. They're a duo, and a clever one, and I'm forgetting the name of the other brother. Him Low and Clever One. They've been doing solo albums, though. They've been doing albums with Gallo Point producing, so they got a lot of great stuff, you know what I mean? And I think my favorite was the one that Lord Beat Jitsu produced. You know what I mean? That was my favorite one. If you know what I know, you go check it out, though. Innocent. He was so underpromoted, criminally underpromoted. And he had 2 hardcore records, though. One with Nutso, and that was a banger. And he had another one that I got to build with him about Escape from Alcatraz 2 on DJ Toshi's Classic Storm a while back. You know what I mean? And that record finally came out in 2020. So if you want that hardcore, NYC boom bap, look no further than Innocent. You know what I mean? A-Preem is on this hardcore militant hip-hop. Aguilar, I'm going to talk about later. Honey De Niro, there's no record that can't be hardcore that she makes. Illa Days out of the Wiseman, though. His album was very dope. Kobe, that's spelled C-O-B-Y. Kobe. All produced by Bronze Nazareth, so you know what's going to be in there. And Illa Days, he has one of the most fluid, choppy flows I've ever heard. It's choppy, but it's fluid. It's hard to do. Cool Taj the Great. He released an album this year. It's very dope. Repping the Low Lives. Very dope album. Griselda is always hardcore movement. They have to be mentioned in this list, but I mentioned them in another category. Jameel Honesty. I interviewed him for DJ Toshi's Classic Storm. Kingdom Come. More bangers. Good Spanish hip-hop. Language hip-hop, too, thrown in there. Illa G quietly released some albums, though. I think the Pineapple Juice was the best one I heard. And then Water with the double R at the end. Definitely got to look for him. So then I have, not sure how much time I have left, but then we have the Boom Bap Essence, and that way I could fly through this. Then I could fly through this list. Boom Bap Essence. I like to lead it off with Lex. Lex had a compilation of old records, but then he had a new record that was really dope. I'm going to talk about it when I get to, the articles, going to detail it, though, because nobody talked about it. People have great fan bases. They have honorable fan bases. But Lex music is so Queens, you know what I mean? I know those are his influences, but he really captures a wonderful native tongues vibe when he rhymes. You know what I mean? And it doesn't sound, he's not doing anything like native tongues except being from Queens. But let's see, what's the name of that album he did with Buck? Yeah, Let Go. This is a great album he did with Buck. Producing. Get for that. Shabam Shadiq, he had an album very, very early in 2020. It has to be in the list. One Below, Midas the Beast, Marvelous, who, by the way, both of them used the same title and the same theme because they took it from the same children's book. But 2 different albums, both pure boom bap. Black Castan and Stu Bangers, I got to interview him for DJ Toshi's Classic Storm. They continued their series of Watson and Holmes, number 3. Definitely anything Stu Bangers is hip-hop, is boom bap. He's one of the best retro modern producers. John Jiggs, good album. Griselda's got to be in the boom bap lips. The brother Proven. King Arthur again. Sa Rock has got to be in here. I mentioned her later. Riggs. I'm a big fan of Riggs and Mooch. I put them in a different category where I talk about them, but they belong to be recognized in the boom bap essence as well. And of course, Neek the Exotic. I don't think there's ever a Neek the Exotic record I don't like, and that certainly was the case here. A dope record. And again, when I fill all this out, you'll be able to see everything in more details. Then I have a category called the Invisible Renaissance Essential MCs. These are the MCs that after the 2010s were up, and I wrote my Filtered Real book, I named them the Essential MCs. And it's really not because they're more essential than other guys like Rome Streets or Ito or others, but they were essential from the beginning of this renaissance. I said started in 2010. Cyrus Malachi, the Blind Watchmaker. You know what I mean? I wrote a review about it in premierhiphop.com. It'll be linked when I write this piece. Great album. Cyrus Malachi is one of the greatest baritone voices and one of the great lyricists I've ever heard. His vocabulary, his word usage, his details, it's all there. Napoleon the Legend. I have him in a different category, but he's mentioned in this one as well. He's an essential MC. Another great year in one of the greatest primes I've ever listened to in my life that spanned years. Spit Gems, I talked about him later in Lone Treasures because he only released one great album. Sarok, speak about it later. Skanks. Skanks always has great work. He's an essential MC. I didn't get to write about him just yet. I save him for later. But he's going to have a lot written about him in here. King Arthur I mentioned. Kai I mentioned later. Rock Marciano. Starvin' B never fails when he releases. And he released a couple of albums. The Melting Pot was my favorite. I Can't Let It Go without mentioning the album from Skanks that I loved. Because he had some work. I think he had more than one album. Let's give it a go. This is why I brought my laptop here. Too much detail. You know what I mean? I don't want to leave you behind. Have you go do your Googles. I can be Google for this hour here. But, yeah, Skanks. Yeah, one of my favorite albums. New World Order. I love the artwork. I love the guy that he started out the album with, me. It's just a great album, though. Skanks doesn't do anything bad. Everything he has, you have to collect. You know what I mean? He's literally a textbook definition of what hip hop is. Like, you look it up in a dictionary. MC, he's in there. Rex. I wasn't crazy about Rex's album, but Rex is definitely the MC of such stellar quality that I definitely have to go back to, and that's a problem. Rex and me not getting into Rex's album immediately is exactly what I mean by the overloading of the music. You know what I mean? You have to realize that some people get overloaded. Then we have Sleep Sinatra, who released a lot of short stuff, but a lot of good stuff. Then we have the MC's work, and I led that off with Killer Priest. I'll talk about him later. Supreme Cerebro, I mentioned. Ill Conscious, Sky Zoo. Sky Zoo is the MC's MC, and he released 2 short EPs. I got to bill with him on DJ Toshi's Classic Storm Radio last year, so check that out. His Father's Day EP about fathers is one of the rare albums you'll ever get. How many people make albums about their father and about fatherhood? And it wasn't corny. Like, it wasn't corny, though. You know what I mean? It wasn't, all stupid sounding. You know what I mean? Where you just feel goofy listen to it. You know what I mean? Right? You can feel goofy listening to some shit like that. But it didn't even come off like that. You know what I mean? And because Sky Zoo, and I'm saying this is because Sky Zoo has such ever-growing obsession and insight to jazz, it's affecting the crates that he is getting produced with. Because a lot of people don't know, when you're an MC, even though you don't produce the tracks, even if you don't produce the tracks, your musical intelligence affects the way the producer produces. You know what I mean? Because you could be bringing them stuff or telling them what you like, and that's what happens. So you got Sky Zoo, MC's. the Techniques, Freddie Gibbs got to be on it. Sa Rock, Napoleon the Legend. I have a couple of other people I got to add in here, but they're for the guys that have there. Rim, I've always found Rim to be an MC's MC, perfect mentor and doing great stuff. Sean P would be really proud, you know what I mean? Because he doesn't sound at all like Sean P. I think if Rim sounded like Sean P, he would be upset. But the fact that Rim is so dope on his own and so unique is exactly what, he wanted. Look at the MCs that Sean P used to like. They weren't at all like him. They were totally different. The MCs he used to introduce me to, like Napoleon the Legend, totally different, If you were like Sean Price, though, which I don't know how you could be like him, then you'd have a problem, though. He definitely wouldn't like you. Then you got Ransom. Ransom had a great year, man. Ransom had a great year. Those works with Nicholas Craven producing, though, he's a real run-on MC where he starts rhyming, you feel like you're already listening to him already. You know what I mean? He's an in-the-pocket speedster. I mentioned Sleep Sinatra again. Elo Kush, who we had on the show, we built on. Spit Gems, I mentioned. Tesla's Ghost, I love this 2 albums. J Royale had one of the great albums this year. Superbad Solus. We had Solus here, in one of my early episodes. Billion Man Rebellion, though. You know what I mean? Don Teak and, the incredible CF. Those brothers are incredible, and Billion Man Rebellion's debut album was impeccable. And, then you had I'm going to go through these faster. We had Crime Rhyme, Street Lyricist. And I specifically write about it. I am not clicheing any of these people. I'm saying that these are no matter what, a lot of people are buying these because they want to hear about black crime. And they love black and brown crime. But the truth is that they end up getting quality while they do it. You know what I mean? And they also get MCs. So you got leading off Griselda, Flea Lord, who OD'd. Absolutely OD'd with 12 albums. Freddie Gibbs, Boldy James, Ito, who I just mentioned, Rome Streets, Ransom, Mooch, Riggs, they're all talked about here. Willie the Kid, one of the unsung heroes, Huss Kingpin, who just released a really dope album for this year. Knowledge the Pirate, who gave you one stellar work. El Camino, Danielson, J Royale, who I mentioned, Crime Apple, who was decent, and G4 Jack, one of the great voices in this. Then I have another category, the Progressives, who's led off with one of the MCs of the year. All right, I'm going to be honest, though. If I had to pick my favorite MC this year, 2020, was Killah Priest. I loved his work. I loved the obsession with poetry that he was doing. These 3 albums play off, they interplay, and as far as progressive works, he's the leader. Then you have Ras Fresco with his Magneto Was Right series. Progressive works. And I'm going to describe why. Al Divino, one of the most craziest producers, choppiest, next level flows. Uncle John, rhymes like no one out there. I called him once the Albert Ayler of hip hop. And if you know Albert Ayler and you look him up in his jazz works, then you know what I mean, though. You'll be like, what the hell is this? That's what happens when you listen to Uncle John. Stove God Cooks. That Reasonable Doubt record. Who's done that? I think that it could be very cliched and stereotyped and could get very played out if he stays so stuck in the stove. But that Reasonable Doubt is a very, very next level record. S.STREET, I mention here because of the Baladas record, which also, to me, is basically a boom bap trap album. Very, very innovative. Rock Marciano, Starker, especially his work with produced by Al Divino. Magno Garcia, who's all of his song concepts are next level. Subtext, who's a great writer and songwriter who had here all the time. Greasy Amin, everything Greasy does, it to me is progressive. Nobody does it like him. You know what I mean? One of the most charismatic and off the wall MCs, though. You know what I mean? Then I have another category, the Lone Treasures. I'll just mention the Lone Treasures. Ka, Descendants of Cain, to give you an example. The Billion Man Rebellion debut. J Royale's Baltimore Housing Project. Spit Gems, Dove in the Snake Pit. Busta Rhymes, Extinction Level Event 2. Because that's the only thing he gave us, though. Even though it was like 1,000 records in one. Willie Ways, who I mentioned early on in the show. The Avant-Garde, who I was so honored to be part of. Aprim's War Gods. Sarok's Sharecropper's Daughter. I love that record. Ralphie Reese's Shine Mosley. Family Gang Black. That's the name of the group. Ventilation. Blue in Exile, Miles. Merce the Big Body Benz. Her album. Mr. Liff. The album he did with Stu Bangers, which I interviewed Mr. Liff recently. Rugged and Raw. A lot of people didn't know, my man Rugged and Raw came back with a dope record called Quarantine. It's funny, he called it Quarantine, and it was before the quarantine that he made the album, you know? King Arthur, Insurgent Theory, Niles the Pirate, and his lone album. Then you have the extended verses. 2020 wouldn't be a good categories if you didn't have a category for people that just release a mad amount of work. The top three guys, Killer Priest, Napoleon the Legend, Raz Fresco. They released multiple albums. 3 for Killer Priest, about 5 or 6 for Napoleon, about 8 for Raz Fresco. And if you pulled one of any of these albums, just pull one of them from their collections, you'll have a great album. You don't have to. You don't have a filler album in that group, and that's almost impossible to do. Then you have Aguilar, who released at least 8 albums, and I was proud to be part of one of them. The album with Sadat X, which is a great album. I think Aguilar's made some of the best works about the quarantine. His Dorona 1 and 2 are great albums, actually. They are really great. When Aguilar is actually really profound when he rhymes about specific topics. You know what I mean? A lot of people wouldn't expect that. Zagnif Nori with his whole Gemstone series and other albums. Flea Lord, I think he fizzled, releasing 12 albums. I thought that was too much. But when you listen to the 12 albums, they're all good. It's just that he gave us fatigue. You know what I mean? We got Flea Lord fatigue. You can't listen to all that at one shot. But he had an album with Buck Wild, that album with Pete Rock. I mean, you got to get those if you start. You got to get an album with Pete Rock produced. You got to collect that. Noah the Flood I mentioned. Then you have, and some detail. The reason they're in different categories, I'm going to give the detail that goes with why they're in the category. So that way you know that these categories are real, and this is why this movement is working. The movement cornerstones is the category. And it's a small list. 38 Special, leading the Trust crew with like Ransom, Che Noir, Rashid Chappelle, and others. Rock Marciano, he's the leader of all this. Everybody's biting him. He's a leader in a whole bunch of stuff. He's the stylist of note. He's a cornerstone. Planet Asia, not just for the stellar work, but when you're fishing through all these great MCs I'm talking about, Planet Asia has some way of being in the mix somewhere here. You know what I mean? And by the way, as a side note, I mentioned Rashid Chappelle. I didn't even finish this thing because Rashid Chappelle should have been mentioned on almost all of these other lists. Crime Rhyme, Progressives, Lone Treasures, MCs. So it's like I'm not finished yet. So don't get mad at me. You know what I mean? But, and then leading off the cornerstones, you got to have cornerstone. The most biggest cornerstone is Griselda. No matter whether we like it or not. And you ought to enjoy it. You ought to enjoy it because there's very rarely rappers that blow up that actually sound good. You could say it's the same shit, but it's really a high quality of the same shit. Right? You can't be mad. Like, I was listening to West Side Gun's albums. He had 3 albums. I think the Who Made the Sunshine is the one you go with, and only because it has Slick Rick on it, and just Slick Rick on these tracks sounds incredible. But his rhyming on Fly God Is Awesome Too is actually good. Who Made the Sunshine? He's stellar. Conway's works are still good. From a King to God, you ought to have it. I thought Benny the Butcher's Burden of Proof is the weakest work out of all the Griselda this year. Then I put him separately. The Queens. A lot of women don't like to be put as a female MC, but I don't give a damn what you say, because a queen is like a left-handed pitcher in baseball. You know what I mean? We're talking all this mess about what this, that, but you know what? No one can throw left-handed, and we need that left-hander. The woman is going to do stuff that a man can't do. You know what I mean? And they deserve their own highlight, even as we put them in these other categories, as I have. Sarok, I mentioned. Che Noir, who had a great album with Apollo Brown. That's where you begin. Merce the Big Body Benz. What a great record she put out. Let me see if I can quickly pull that up. I just want to get you the title of that. But Merce the Big Body Benz, you know, she didn't really get a lot of fame, a lot of hype, but The Many-Faced Goddess is an album you should have. Honey De Niro, Retribution. Great album, though. My only issue was that it was too short, though. I wanted more, though. And I had too much to say about that. And his sister Out, she just did a song with Planet Asia. She has a lot of nice work, and she's a really great singer as well. So she rhymes and she sings. Is Maya Huyana. A lot of great work, though, and her voice is great for MCing, too. Then I mentioned there's a list, a category, Legends and Greats Ongoing, Nas, Public Enemy, / Enemy Radio, because there's 2 albums there, Black Thought, Common. People fronted on the Common album because he got blown out the box by Busta Rhymes, but it was a good album. Really good album. No, it was, though. You know, he was blown out the box. But Common didn't really promote it like that, but it was a great record. J Live always comes with great records. Sadat X mentioned because he did that great work with Aguilar. C. Ray's Walls released an album at the very end of December. John Robinson, always dope work. He even did a great R&B album. And then Mr. Lift, who I mentioned before with the Stu Bangers album. And the last category, producers, because there's a lot of good compilations and stuff. I'll just quickly name them. 38 Special, Alchemist, Stu Bangers, Jordan River Banks, because he did the 2 albums with Killer Priest, and they're so progressive. You got to give it to him. Wavy the God, who did a lot of stuff for Eddie Kane and others, Bub Rock and all of them, and Rim. DJ Muggs, if he does stuff, I put him on the list. Al Divino, Buck Wild, who did solo compilations of his own productions with other MCs, but he also produced whole albums for Rashid Chappelle, which is stellar. And a very strong album for Flea Lord. Preservation. A lot of people don't talk about Preservation, but he had a good compilation. Apollo Brown with Che Noir. Spanish Ran. Bass Reeves, who did the stuff for Heist Life. And that rounds out the list, man. And they'll be filled up. You see, I made the glaring era. And Rashid Chappelle knows how much I've written about him. I actually have an entire manifesto written about an album that he has yet to release. That I think, just to put it out there, I think it may be better and certainly as good as the one he released this year with Buck Wild. That's how good the album was. You know what I mean? And that hasn't even been released. I think that the success that he had with with Buck Wild, he didn't need to release another one, so all power to him. The Sinners and Saints album, which is a great album, though, no flaws in that one. And I think that was the peak of Buck Wild's work too, so when you get this Reel of 2020 list on Premier Hip Hop, you can surf through and see who overlaps. What type of styles are you looking to listen to? What type of environment does hip-hop have now? What is this field that I keep calling the invisible renaissance? Make it real, the field. You know what I mean? And if that's, I think, pretty much done for today's show. Again, unless we have guests, we'll have a lot more talk about other things. Doom. Whether he's still alive or not, though, I shed a tear when Doom passed. You know what I mean? The people like Doom and others in the 2000s, though, they inspired the continuation of deep, meaningful hip hop for brothers like us that were in our adulthood. People like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, look, you have a family, you got to quit this hip hop shit. And, Doom, Mr. Lift, others, you know what I mean? Jean Grey, you know what I mean? In that whole movement. But I think we're good, right? So until next time, man, enjoy this Reel of 2020, though. That published piece will be on premierhiphop.com very, very soon. Until next time, there'll be a lot more stories to tell, writings to recite, and records to rewind and reminisce. I am your host, Sunni Azala, a.k.a. Skillustrator Low. And as always, the Power Right Show is a never respect fake broadcast. Peace.